Now I'm going to make this one short and sweet. We want to talk about a lot about hunting strategy and how you attract mature bucks to a small parcel. And really, short and sweet, because Dylan tells me we got to get moving, got to get cracking. So that's important. Right, Dylan?
Yep.
We're on a schedule. Got to get this done. Dylan reminds me of that. And but bottom line is there are not a lot of properties that are focused on by mature bucks in the neighborhood. I always say 5% or less. And if you're not attracting mature bucks during the daylight, you can't be a herd influencer. It doesn't matter what you do at night. You're not influencing anything, the health of the herd or anything. Just because they come to your food plots at night because they're nocturnal food plots is not a good thing. It's very interesting when you think about, I was on another property last week, won't even tell you what state or where, but the landowner goes through a large property owned by a public entity that allows the locals to be on the property here and there, but not hunt. He can access through. In fact, his legal easement goes right through that property. So he's one of the few that actually has legal right to be there all the time and can access it in a legal manner. Huge bucks. Last year, close to 200-inch buck was shot on it, or shot adjacent to it. And that buck grew old simply because it could stay within those acres. And there's a huge number of deer that come out of there every single night. And it's just a big stand of pines and undergrowth. There are some briars, and vegetation actually is very thick in some areas. They did clear cut a pocket in one location. There are so many of those areas across the country. Try to think about those in your neighborhood, in your city, your suburban area, and think about some of those locations that have mature bucks where no food plots have been created, no bedding areas, no hinge cuts, no water holes, no mock scrapes, and there are mature bucks there. So I guess you could say that's the answer right there. You just take a property and do nothing to it. Don't hunt it, don't walk on it, and you'll have mature bucks. You know what's crazy? A lot of times you will. If you have mature bucks, older bucks in the neighborhood, they gravitate to locations like that, and then they go find their afternoon food source that's the least hunting pressure, that features the lowest level of hunting pressure in the neighborhood, and that's where they'll hit right at dark or just after, and then they're wherever at night. Don't fall into the trap that deer have a 3-mile home range. Mature bucks. Does have a fraction of that home range. Don't fall into that trap that you can't have deer focus on your property during the daylight, because bucks only focus on on average, they'll focus on a daylight movement of about 200 to 400 yards. I had someone recently say in a comment, well, in our area, we all share photos. These bucks move everywhere. That's probably because they're focusing on priority number 3 right here, which is deer habitat improvements despite hunting strategy. And what I mean by that is a solid hunting strategy means that you're not spooking deer every time you step foot on the property. A lot of times, these deer habitat improvements make it impossible for you to actually use the property, walk around the property. So it all boils back down to the lowest hole in the bucket is hunting strategy. We can end the video right there, I guess. You can just move on. Don't hunt it. Just give these 30 acres to deer all the time. And it's amazing what can happen. Now, of course, I want you to not have that park effect where you can't use it or it's illegal hunting. I want you to add your deer habitat improvements, but you add it to an otherwise already good plan of attack for hunting. That's why we talk about all the time. We go to a property, a client hires us. We're going there with the client, and it's an intentional, I want to improve my habitat. And we do that, but we're improving the hunt first, and then we're adding the habitat improvements to complement how that property can ultimately be hunted. Now, Dylan's going to a property, was it Delaware or Maryland? Maryland. And I believe it was 800 acres. Yeah, that's coming up. And tell them just real quick story about that, why you're even being hired in the first place.
I mean, long story short, it was just they had hired a wildlife and timber management company to come in and do an assessment and come up with a plan. And the plan would have been great for growing wildlife and enhancing the timber value. However, it would have made things very, very difficult to hunt. So, that's, as Jeff is saying here during this video, the hunt part is at least half of it. I mean, more than half of it if you want to be successful. So, having habitat to hunt is important, but hunting it smart is what's actually going to get you some deer on the ground.
Yeah, and it's a priority over the habitat improvements. We see a lot of properties, going back to the park-like effect, where that whether it's a school or whatever it might be, but people have good hunting and they've done nothing to it. And so there's a big case to be said for that. If your habitat improvements lower your potential, which a lot do, and so do a lot of those forestry management plans in general, like Dylan's going to go look at. And luckily those people have been educated enough, they've been watching videos, they've learned, and they recognize that, boy, this would be cool if we did this, but it's going to be impossible to hunt. We run into that all the time, because if the people making the management recommendations don't do this for a living as far as developing hunting properties at a high level and hunting at a high level, then they're never going to be able to apply that to those properties that go if they don't have that personal level of experience to begin with. So going through the list, hunting strategy is so critical. That's how you attract mature bucks to a small parcel. And again, those small parcels are far and few between, and they don't have to be that large. You know, again, that co-op experience where they're sharing photos and they see these bucks over properties all over the place during the daylight. That's because they're spooking them. That's because they probably have invasive access. That's not a good thing. Because what we find is mature bucks now, I'm not saying that they focus on your land for 3 months out of the year, but they can focus on your land when hunting pressure heats up, during the rut, when you specifically have the best food and best cover in the area during the right times, November, December in most states. And they can focus on your property during the daylight. And it's amazing what you can do. Again, property hunted well, set aside, you're limiting the amount of pressure on there, making the deer feel like they're not being pressured. And that's why when someone says, well, I just hunt every time I can, or the more you hunt, the more opportunity you have. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's the exact opposite. That's why more time spent on the couch actually equals results, not you can't kill them from the couch, you need to get out there all the time. That phrase has hurt so many hunters and hurt so many opportunities by getting people to think that the more I sit in my tree stand, the better chance I have. In fact, the more times you sit when it's not the right time, you drastically limit the amount of potential success on your land. Again, hunting strategy, that park-like effect, think about those areas and then add the deer and habitat improvements to match your hunting plan. If you plan on, look at your property as if nothing's done. How would you hunt this? How would you hunt those funnels? Now, a lot of people just go into the middle and sit down in a funnel. You know, there's a case to be made for that. But if you actually want to have food plots and attract those deer for the entire 3 months, not just rely on random movements. Because let's face it, even that park-like effect, unless you have a lot of hunting pressure around you, it's still random. The deer, I go to a lot of properties, even 500 acres, I can think of northern Minnesota, where they added a food plot program, and for the last 15 years they did terrible because they put the food plots on there, attracted all the deer in the area, then they just spooked the deer off, and it made their property a lot worse. They would have been better off going to the first 10 years they owned the property out of 25, where they shot some booners, and they didn't have food plots, and they just hunted it. They just hunted the property smart. And that's what we like to see. How would you hunt that property if you didn't have those improvements? Now add the improvements. You access here, that means you don't put a food plot or a bedding area. That means if you do add this food plot in the sitting area where you access, how does that relate to adjacent bedding? Are you putting a food plot in a location where you have to walk 100 yards away and fragment any potential bedding that relates to that food plot? Do you have to walk through bedding areas during the daylight to get on or off the parcel? Those are things that you can use because food dictates where deer bed. And then where they bed dictates where you should walk during the daylight hours versus nighttime. And then you can actually have an assemblage of stands that make sense on an overall parcel. I'm not saying to not improve your land. I'm saying to improve your land with how you can hunt it at a very high level. And if you do that, it becomes a lot easier than you think. So many people get really roped into the latest fad, the latest fruit tree, the latest nut tree, latest mass tree, whether it's soft or hard, the latest timber cutting practice, girdling, hack and squirt, TSI, great buzzwords, miscanthus grass, switchgrass, whatever it might be, without actually thinking about how you actually hunt your land. And if you hunt it well, that's the first step to actually consistently holding and attracting mature bucks to your hunt this fall. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.